TIFU by telling my partner about an STI after his condom slipped off. I think I up a good thing. This happened about 3 hours ago. I've, F31, been seeing Simon, M31, for a little over a month. We've been taking things slow, partially because of living situations. So we'd only had once before and, besides that one time, the rest of our dates have been and I finally got my place to myself and invited him over for dinner. We didn't even make it to dinner before we were in the bedroom going at it like teenagers. When all was said and done, we realized the condom had slipped off at some point and he'd finished inside couple of weeks ago. I had a Papsmear that came back abnormal. This meant my abusive ex had given me HPV and it may have caused cervical cancer. I have an appointment to have a colposcopy done to find out if it's cancer. I hadn't discussed this with Simon yet. I should have before we had, and I know that I was worrying about plan B, but I knew I had to tell him about his exposure. I blurted it out and things changed drastically. He excused himself to the bathroom for a while. When he came back, he started getting dressed. He gave me money for the plan B and held me for a few minutes before leaving. Before he left, he said he needed to think things through because this was a big red flag. But if he expected openness from me, he felt like he should be honest about his own red flags. I feel terrible for not having told him beforehand. While he seemed to have taken it better than I deserve, I still feel ashamed and I don't know if he can forgive. I didn't tell my partner about having HPV until after the condom came off during.
They will give this vaccine until you are 40 now. Do it.
PSA: if you didn't get your Gardasil vaccine as a teen, you're still eligible until age. Disclose STIs before engaging in activity with a new partner.
Finished treatment 2 years ago last week for HPV cancer at the base of my tongue and 2 lymph nodes in my neck. It's known as being P16+. Treatment was not fun: radiation, chemo, and a radical neck dissection surgery. The good news is P16+ has about a 95% cure rate. No vaccine was available when I was younger. Get your vaccine, please. If you have teens, drag them to the doctor for the vaccination.
Generally speaking, a conversation about STDs should always take place before sleeping with someone new to protect all parties. It's a good habit to get into to protect yourself and your partners. It's recommended to get at least one yearly STD screen and one in between partners since some STDs take time to show up. That being said, the vast majority, 90% of men, 80% of women, of sexuality active people have HPV and most people don't know their status unless they have an abnormal Pap. Here's a link to HPV occurrence because it's so common. They developed the Gardasil vaccine, which is currently the only vaccine that can reduce your cancer risks. It's been on the market for about 18 years and if you don't currently have it, I would recommend you get it. When I got mine about 17 years ago, my doctor told me it could protect you even if you're already sexually active. Also, abnormal Paps are obscenely common if you're young. I had 3 or 4 abnormal Paps at 18 to 19 and freaked out that I had cancer. No one told me that abnormal Paps often clear up on their own. Good luck.
First and foremost, you should never have with someone if you have an STI/STD without disclosing. To me, at the very least, that is very much non-consensual and it's extremely disrespectful. This man may now have an STI/STD that he never wanted, and by the sound of it, never would have even risked getting in the first place. Now, if you did transfer it, he has a possibly incurable condition, all because you were too uncomfortable or shy to disclose that important information. If you can't disclose whether or not you have an STI/STD to a partner, you should not be having it. Thanks for the awards, lol. Bottom line, she made it so he had no informed choice in whether or not he wanted to have with her, and I would feel the same if gender was reversed. I'm done replying to people. BC, you all clearly aren't reading what I'm writing and understanding what I'm trying to say. I did reply to a lot of people, so go read those if you want to. Smile. XOXO.
HPV is very common. Almost all sexually active adults will have it at some point or come into contact with it. Studies range from 80 to 90%. But newer research even suggests it is as high as 96% of sexually active adults. Majority will never know as most people clear it. Many doctors actually tell a patient with HPV that you do not need to disclose your status as it is so common and it is highly stigmatized. Many people are unaware of what HPV is and view it alongside many other STIs when it's kind of like a common cold of STIs. That being said, high-risk strains may need to be communicated to a partner. Again, many providers tell patients they don't need to. Some say you should as it is high risk, as well as the kind that cause genital warts. Another reason why provider will advise patients not to disclose is due to high exposure, meaning many people have built immunity from being exposed and or having it, but vaccination is important for those higher-risk strains. The vaccine is not foolproof though, and there are many different strains. Most women only know they have HPV through an abnormal pap. And again, majority of people will never know they came into contact with it or have/had it. Fun facts: HPV can be spread through deep kissing according to the CDC and WHO. HPV can be spread through skin-to-skin contact, so it is likely a condom may have not been effective anyways. There is no testing for HPV in men. Most of the time men will only know if they are infected with the type that cause genital warts. HPV is almost never screened for during routine STI checks, and is only identified through abnormal cells or warts. Some providers will test women after the age of 25, but it is not common. It is pretty rare to get cancer from HPV, but obviously it happens. The most common being cervical and other cancers of the female reproductive tract. It may be linked to end cancers as well. Evidence suggests this, but more research is needed. It is almost impossible to know who you got HPV from, especially if you had multiple partners or a partner who has had multiple partners, meaning sleeping with more than one person. So lawsuits with this is different than other STIs, because again there is no testing in males. Unless there are visible warts, some people can carry this strain, pass it to others, and clear it, which most do. Then maybe you could. Also, it is different as many providers recommend patients not to disclose your HPV status, unlike other STIs. Also, HPV can lay dormant for years. So again, it's almost impossible to know where you got it from. And again, you can get it from deep kissing. So theoretically you never even need to have of any kind to get HPV. You can spread it through too. Other fun facts, is not usually screened for on routine STI testing, partially due to how common it is, and it's really only checked if you have and can have it and not have an outbreak and spread it to others too. Is also spread through skin-to-skin contact, so again condoms may not be you can get from a person when an outbreak isn't present. Education is important to reduce stigma, hence why I'm sharing so much. Sincerely, a medical professional. Edited to add more info and fixed some typing errors.
Sorry, the condom slipped off. Neither of you realized until after he finished inside of you? That sounds unlikely from the male perspective.
Human papillomavirus, HPV, is a common sexually transmitted infection. More than 90% of sexually active men and 80% of sexually active women will be infected with HPV in their 2022. Most people don't even know they have it. I too had a colposcopy, which is not so unusual. If you get an abnormal pap, for those who don't know, they freaking cut it off, numbing spray and slice and dice until they can no longer see the abnormal cells. It was freaking horrible, and that happy people is a colposcopy. And not a sign that you aren't telling the whole story. It's your doctor taking an abundance of care. That was 27 years ago, and so far I am still here. I had no unprotected. The doctor told me it could be spread even with a condom. Skin contact can be all it takes. Feel free to Google. Condoms do not eliminate your risk 100%. People should know this. This is why they offer kids a vaccine. You cannot prevent this beyond a doubt, even with a barrier.
Well, what are his red flags that he mentioned?
Okay, so I would not say I agree with the very black and white opinions in here. 1. You are dating for tops months and you have had once before. 2 weeks earlier you had a Papsmear come out bad. From my own experience, this does not mean without the shadow of a doubt that you have HPV now. I was advised to take extra steps to confirm HPV was still active, I am confident in saying this because you say the Papsmear is abnormal but not that you are HPV positive. You also will do a colposcopy which only looks at abnormal cells that would be better to be gotten rid of too. You should have better discussed these concerns beforehand, as in health and well-being should be important to the both of you in order to have a better relationship. This point applies to both of you tbh. Both partners should have tests ready on hand to show status and the fact that they get tested regularly. To be upset over somebody else's status only after finding out a risk, to me it says you are playing a game and pick and choose over what to get upset about. Everybody having puts themselves under some risk because certain STDs will not show up on your results right away. 3. I personally do not buy the condom slipping off and not realizing it. I have had this happen 3 times, it was scary but we picked up on it before that. I just don't buy it on a personal level. I would test to see what type of person he really is.
A. Doesn't pretty much everyone have HPV? B. A guy will always be able to tell whether he's bareback or not. A condom doesn't slip off from a guy's perspective without knowing. The amount of extra sensitivity is a dead giveaway.
My partner thought they had HPV. It turned out to be wrong. Greater than false positive. A false positive test result indicates that you have a high-risk type of HPV when you really don't. A false positive result could lead to unnecessary follow-up procedures, such as colposcopy or biopsy, and undue anxiety over the test down to risks.
STD aside, no man doesn't realize a condom slips off. Sorry, but the feeling is pretty drastically different from a condom and no condom. I'm not buying that he didn't notice, and Brain just said to keep going and pay $50 to get Plan B afterwards and get in a cheap nut. But yeah, you definitely should have told him beforehand.
Simon says you should have told him about having HPV before.
If you research this topic, it's quite 50-50 on the tell/don't tell. My gyno explained it like a cold, everyone gets it. There's no test for men for HPV. You should have told him, but unless you have the type that activates genital warts, his health is fine. Perhaps you can try to explain that to him for some peace of no way in. No matter how hot and heavy, does a dude not recognize he's raw dodging it? Takes like 5 seconds to realize isn't gathering in a condom. 2 wrongs don't make a right though. Pretty messy all around.
It's 45 in the States, Cigna is paying for all of mine. Just got my second dose last month at 42. When you are over a certain age, it's a 3-shot vaccine. Initial, 2 months later and at 6 months. Children only require 2 shots.
To expand on this, before any activity. That includes. Honestly, I think it's a good idea to discuss things even before making out, if you can. But at least before touching each other's genitals. I wanted to add this on because there are far too many people who don't consider. Kudos mentioning Gardasil shot too.
Yo, I scrolled way too far to see any mention of vaccines in this chat. Good on you for adding to the discussion something other than wait, doesn't everyone have HPV? So who cares? Thankfully my mother got me vaccinated when I was a child. I had some partners when I was younger who definitively could have potentially exposed me to harm. Hilariously, I rejected a lady I was friends with who wanted to hook up as I was into only for my ex to hook up with her anyway. Among a bunch of other questionable people, and not tell me in similar fashion to op. And, not so, funny enough, she had the cancerous strain of HPV I was vaccinated to, embarrassed smiley face.
Greater than radical neck dissection surgery. Jesus. That's one of the worst combination of words I've ever. Did you find out you had this?
I think it's also worth pointing out that there's no way to know if it came from the ex or not. Unless he was the only person she'd ever had with. The incubation time on HPV isn't consistent and it can affect you months or even years later. Most people's bodies will fight it off. Like in the UK it's not included in standard STI screenings and it's also not possible to test men here. At least, not on the NHS.
I don't know where you are based, but I'm in Australia and my son got the vaccine in year 9, 14/15 of a years old, to try to get to kids before they are sexually active. As someone who's had 3 cone biopsies and had to have stitches in pregnancies after because of it, the fact it's taken so seriously here made me so happy.
I have to correct something you said using the link you provided. 90%/80% of people do not have HPV but instead get it at some point. Considering it clears itself after about 2 years, that is a big difference.
True. I've had 2 already, cleared up on their own. But she mentioned colposcopy, which makes me think there's more to her story than she's sharing. With my 2 HPV positive results, it was not suggested I get further testing shortly after. Only to check at my annual. Maybe I meant abnormal pap. I was half asleep when I commented.
If this could be answered with criminal litigation, add it. Based on where you live, you can be criminally liable for giving someone an STD without their knowledge, with punishments ranging from fines to serving hard time.
Condoms aren't even a proper safeguard against HPV, it spreads skin to skin. Also, the majority of the adult population has had it, minus 90% of men, 80% of women.
With AIDS I agree with you, but HPV is better to assume the other person has it, period. If anyone sexually active reads this, you almost certainly have HPV. Greater than it is so common and it is highly this post.
Thank you. I have been shocked reading this post, seeing how uneducated people are about HPV and telling this poor girl she's committing assault when most people here have probably given a partner HPV at some point.
Dude, 1000% knew it came off. Some guys like to live dangerously.
I am 100% convinced that given the pressure a condom exerts when it's on, and the fact you can see it, and the fact it feels radically different off versus on, there is no way a man doesn't notice that it has come off. 0 chance. Breaking? Yeah, but slipping off? No.
My wife once asked what the difference feels like between using a condom and not using one. She was wearing heavy winter gloves at the time. I rubbed her hand over the glove, then took the glove off and rubbed it again. That explains sounds like both appear. She didn't tell him about the STD, and he was playing games to win prizes.
Yeah, he took it off for sure. That's not something that you don't notice has happened.
The fact that he knew the condom came off, there's no way he didn't know.
Greater than A. Doesn't pretty much everyone have HPV? Yep, if you've had more than 2 to 3 partners you likely have been exposed to genital HPV strains. Other HPV strains cause common skin warts, and everyone has been exposed to these strains.
This PSA is brought to you by Michael Douglas.
Yeah man, is almost as high risk as unprotected PIV. And in my experience, most people think using a condom/dental dam for is weird, even if they use condoms for intercourse. Please, everyone, get your shots. Talk about STIs/contraception before you're doing anything with your prospective partner. And actually follow through on your contraception/STI protection method every time.